Did the Prime Minister deliver what was expected at the 76th Annual Conference? Are the criticisms being levelled by the opposition fair? Those were among the questions that were raised during CVM Live's panel discussion. The details in this report. Described as flat and without substance by the opposition People's National Party, CVM Live asked a diverse panel about their impressions of Andrew Holness's address at the 76th Annual JLP Conference, and their assessment was largely complimentary.
The big goal that Andrew scored was that he came there to explain primarily to his party members, massive attendance, correct? And the country that he's ready for another term.
The opposition described the Massives gathering as a bunch of optics without substance. However, political and social commentator Javian Nelson suggested that the JLP had nevertheless raised the bar in terms of their slick presentation.
When you look at the conference, it was really well done. I think it's almost as though the JLP is catalyzing a new normal and saying, this is what you can expect from us, but we're asking everybody to kind of try and step up to our plate if you think about it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's when you look at it and you listen to how everything came together, it's almost like a quilt, right? All different pieces just stitched together to make one beautiful thing.
The opposition's descriptions of the Prime Minister's speech as a series of ramblings seemingly gained some traction with Helene Davis-White, who suggested it was difficult to pinpoint the focus of the address.
Part of the difficulty with Andrew's speech was that he touched on so many things. It was difficult to focus on any one thing. Right. And I think that would be probably the drawback of his speech, because he was obviously trying to hit the mark for so many different interest groups that it lacked that kind of focus.
And we now go back to our lead story on the Prime Minister and NIDS. Passed in the Parliament in late 2017, with the assent of the Governor-General in December of that year. The NIDS bill was eventually struck down in a landmark ruling by the Supreme Court, which reasoned that certain provisions of the Act were unconstitutional, specifically issues relating to the individual's right to privacy. And while the governing Jamaica Labour Party said that it respected the decision of the court, a reconstituted version of the legislation was always expected. Today in Parliament, Prime Minister Andrew Holness detailed the progress of the NIDS bill's return.
Following the government's decision to appeal the April 2019 Constitutional Court's ruling concerning the National Identification and Registration Act 2017, the NIDS project team embarked on a rescheduling of the main activities under the contract between the Government of Jamaica and the Productive Business Solutions Limited-led consortium to focus on the ICT upgrade activities until the requisite legislative framework is put in place.
Prime Minister Holness made it clear that the government wouldn't be abandoning the identification aspect of the NIDS program.
The government has completed a revised policy consistent with the recommendations of the Supreme Court's ruling on the NIDS that is now being reviewed by our primary stakeholders.
The target is to issue new drafting instructions with strengthened oversight and security provisions by the end of the 2019 financial year.
Our target is to issue new drafting instructions with strengthened oversight and security provisions by January 2020, with the aim to table a new bill by the end of financial year 2019-2020. Mr. Speaker, we have always pointed out that this program was much more than identification. This program was always about modernizing Jamaica's ICT infrastructure to support the effective and efficient delivery of government services.
Long-suffering Flow and Digicel customers may soon benefit from automatic compensation. That is according to the Office of Utilities Regulation Public Education Specialist Elizabeth Bennett Marsh, who says the OUR will be consulting with the public about implementing the measure for customers affected by significant service disruptions. Our reporter Khadija Thomas explains in this report.
The Office of Utilities Regulation, OUR, intends to take further action against the telecommunication providers who continue to breach national standards.
We are going to be embarking on a consultancy with the public about automatic compensation for customers who are affected by a significant interruption in their service.
In recent months, customers have been raising concerns about the quality of service provided by telecommunication providers Flow and Digicel. Now, this move by the OUR is expected to bring about some level of change.
Public education specialist at the OUR, Elizabeth Bennett Marsh, says meeting with the telecom companies was the first step to promoting compliance among providers. However, if the issue continues, then the OUR would have to issue directives and orders. Currently, the Jamaica Public Service has to automatically compensate customers once there is a breach. In 2016, the OUR said this step was due to the final phasing out of written claims made by customers to the company. Now, Flow and Digicel may be required to do the same.
If it is that your service is interrupted for any significant period, and we'll determine the period as we develop the document, then customers should be rebated. If it is that you make a complaint or you apply for a service and it takes longer than the prescribed period, then the customer is to be rebated. So we're putting that in place. Currently, I know Flow has a 72-hour rebate where customers who are out of service for 72 consecutive hours, they are entitled to a rebate. We're also asking customers if they have made an application for that rebate and they do not receive it, they need to contact the OUR.
According to Bennett Marsh, the OUR is open to other providers entering the telecommunication space in Jamaica.
The OUR welcomes competition in the telecom sector. We have no problem with it. There is no restriction on telecoms licenses. The only restriction is where it applies to, for example, spectrum, and we don't regulate that. In fact, if you go on our website, because we are a very transparent company, we do have a list of all the telecoms license providers that we have approved. That list was last updated in June this year.
Khadija Thomas,
The Jamaica Aid Support for Life is calling for more safe spaces for victims of gender-based violence. The group says the alarming number of people, mainly women, affected by violence is a serious cause for concern that requires a multifaceted approach. The group led a march to create awareness about the issue in Kingston earlier today. Jamaica Maitland reports.
Youth from across the island painted Halfway Tree purple as they marched in protest calling for an end to gender-based violence. The protest, though silent, sent a strong message to those who carry out violence against women. November 25 is globally recognized as International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Policy and Advocacy Officer at the Jamaica Aid Support for Life, Patrick Layla, says there is not enough support for women. He's calling for more safe spaces.
So a lot of women want to get out of this situation, but they live in a house that belongs to the man that's abusing them. They are being maintained by the man that's abusing them. So what we need is more shelters for battered women. We need more shelters that can give these women some hope, because the concern is always, where am I going to live? Where am I going to go with the children if I get out of this situation?
And one survivor of gender-based violence, Tashima Brown, recounts her experience. She was a victim of incest and rape as a child. But Ms. Brown says she was able to overcome with the help of Eve for Life.
I was lost until I met Eve, and Eve turned everything around. So we need to look out for the signs and don't say about the child bad. No child is bad, they are just crying out for attention.
And one volunteer, Daniel Beckford, describes the march as inspiring. He's calling for more males to play their part in the fight against gender-based violence.
Whether it's a case where the male is the victim or the male is a perpetrator, they're involved in any particular way. So I believe that in order for us to further the conversation surrounding gender-based violence and violence affecting women, especially because today is the International Day against violence. International Day for Violence Against Women, I believe it's important for us males to be a part of the conversation and to be out here to represent our women.
Jamila Maitland for CVM Live.